as Krista said, I want to tell you some lessons, but a little bit of information ahead of time is that I am, as Arian pointed out, I am writing another book at this point, and the book is called Experiencing Freedom. The walk that I did with this backpack, actually, I walked from Saskatoon to Cape Spear, Newfoundland with this one, and from Vancouver Island to here with a bigger pack with my winter gear in it, and then I downscaled for the summer. And on the back of both backpacks was this flag, and hashtag Freedom Walk was my Facebook and Twitter handle for the walk, and it was about raising awareness for the importance of freedom. The book is called Experiencing Freedom because freedom is important to me, but I was never sure what it really meant to me. And through the process, I experienced freedom. So that's the name of the book. And the subtitle is Lessons Learned Through 10 Million Steps. I calculated it out, and 8,000 kilometers is 10 million steps. Now, when I started writing the book, I didn't know how it would go. But the way writing works for me is sometimes when I get going, then it defines itself and how it's going to be. And it is a chronology of where I am, the places I'm seeing, the people I talk to, the towns I visit, and so on. But it's also a commentary of what's going on with me mentally. And as I started to go into it, I realized that almost every day there was a lesson to be learned. So that means there was quite a few lessons. It was 193 days. But I'm going to share with you 4 of those lessons today. And they came about as the result of something happening to me, something I was experiencing as I was going. The first one had to do with when I was in Northern Ontario on the Trans-Canada Highway. There, from the prairies, you have a divided highway. When you get into Northern Ontario, it's a single highway. And there's no paved shoulder. It's a gravel shoulder, and they grade it down at about 30 degrees. So it's very difficult to walk on because my feet were twisted like this for thousands and thousands of kilometers. So I wanted to walk up on the road, but that presented a danger, especially with the logging trucks. A lot of logging trucks there. And I could hear them coming, and I became aware of a certain danger. And it was a tap, 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 slap, 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 slap on the road, which was a tire that was in rough shape. And the logging trucks have rough tires, I'm guessing because they go off-road a lot. But there was this one truck coming towards me one day. I could hear the slapping, and then it got even a greater frequency. So there was one little flap of rubber turned into several flaps of rubber. I said to myself, I gotta be careful here. So I got well off the road, and about the distance from that wall to me as the truck approached, 100 PSI, boom! It went off. And chunks of rubber just flew past me down the highway and just laid out black alligators as far as the eye could see. And the truck just kept on going. Some of them went by me very close, and I realized if it had taken off, if it had blown further up, they would have gotten farther out like a shotgun and come at me. So the lesson I learned in that process is to be able to assess danger and be aware of it and cognizant of it. The second story had to do with another truck, but this was a smaller truck. It was a Dodge truck, Dodge pickup truck, an older one. And I was told before I went on my walk by people who had gone on walks before, they said, be careful, there's some crazy people out there who will play with you. It never happened to me up till then. It was in Manitoba, but it happened to me only once. I was walking along, and here comes this truck on the shoulder towards me at full speed. And I realized, okay, I have to be aware of the danger, and I have to be prepared. And I just kept walking, but watching the guy. And I could see he wasn't asleep. There was 2 guys. They were laughing at each other. They kept coming right at me, and about 100 feet from me, they swerved back. And then they took another jog at me, and they went past me. The mirror just went past my shoulder like this, at about 100 kilometers an hour. And I realized that they were probably more freaked out than I was, because I suspected this was their way of playing whack-a-mole with people on the highway to make people jump, and I wasn't going to jump. Except I was ready because I was assessing the danger, so that at any moment I was going to go, but I stood my ground. So that was a freedom lesson I learned. was to stand my ground. The next lesson I learned was also in a similar area in Manitoba, where the prairie turns into conifer trees. If you ever driven there, all of a sudden it gets into lake country, and it's all of a sudden really beautiful before you hit the Ontario border. Well, I was camping one night, and this is my camping gear. This is the extent of my tent. I've got to camp in many, many nights. I was camping in this. You can see I'm fairly vulnerable in there because there is nothing between me except one little tiny piece of material. I'm sleeping in there at night. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I hear just right outside my tent. And then again. And I'm thinking, like, my heart's starting to go like this, and I'm waking up like, what the heck? I'm thinking it's either a bear, or it's a moose, or it's a deer, or it's something, I don't know, but it's pretty big to blow that much air. But then I heard beside my tent, and I realized, okay, it's likely not a bear, because bears don't stamp. I don't know what moose do, but I do know that deer, especially bucks, when you're in their territory and they don't want you there, they'll stamp. So I had my trekking poles outside my tent. I always kept them there so I could get at them. But I realized if I make a move, I don't know what's going to happen. So what I did is I returned the gesture. I went in my tent like that, and all of a sudden I heard feet. I didn't know if it was charging at me or taking off the other way. But fortunately, in a few seconds, they stopped, and it was... So I rolled over again and grunted again, and I heard it scurrying away, and it had gone out of the way and down farther away from me. So I learned something that night, though. I learned a freedom lesson, which is to be prepared to defend myself. I had my hunting knife, I had my trekking poles, always in the same spot. They could be found in the middle of the night, because there was nothing between me and whatever was going to come at me. The next freedom lesson I learned came about camping in bear country. I was a bit of a scaredy cat about bears, actually, I have to admit that, because I never had very many encounters with bears before. But when I was in Thunder Bay, there was a guy called Fast Eddie. You can look him up on Facebook and so on. He was running, he'd run across Canada, he was running back, and I met him in Thunder Bay. And he gave me some bear bangers. He said, there's a kind of a crazy bear just east of Nipigon, and it chased him along the highway. So I said, well, okay, I'll take the bear bangers, but then I forgot to bring them. I left them in Thunder Bay, and I walked, and when I got past Nipigon, sure enough, there was a bear. And then another half an hour later, there's another bear. There's so many bears there, it's crazy. About a day out of Nipigon, almost camping time, a truck pulls over the side of the road, a Jeep, and the guy says, you know what, there's 2 bears around the corner, and they're eating something on the side of the road. I do not recommend you walk up the road. Get in my truck, I'll drive you past them. And I go, you don't understand. I'm walking 10 million steps, and if I walk 9,999,000, I won't be able to live with myself. I have to walk past those bears. He said, well, you know what? They're not budging, and I wouldn't recommend you walk past them. They said, I'll tell you what you can do, what it will do then. I'll take you down to my campsite, which is 5 kilometers back down the road, and you camp down there overnight, and there's probably no bears. Okay, fair enough. So we get in his truck, drive down the road, a mile off the highway, and there's a little lake there. He says, perfect spot for you to camp right here. And I said, yeah, but where are you at? He said, well, we're another mile down in our camp, but this is fine. I said, I'll make it fine. He says, I'll go get my buddy's bear bangers for you, which, for those of you who don't know, it's like a little gun that shoots a firecracker at a bear, and it makes a huge explosion. Anyway, he comes back with his buddy, Larry, and Larry was a guy who grew up with bears. And he started talking, he's telling me all these stories. You know, he said, bears, they don't usually bother you, you know, they're just a bunch of scaredy cats, and there's lots of them here. And he says, but I'll tell you how to deal with them. He said, I worked with an old big Indian. He was an older guy, used older terms. up in Lake Nipigon years ago at a fish camp. And these bears would come around, and he said, you know when there's a bear coming because it'll stick its nose into your tent to sniff what's there. And he said, the big Indian told me, all you do is you wind up and you punch it as hard as you can in the nose, and they're like babies that go running off into the woods. Now, does anybody think I was comfortable at this point? So there I was set up, and there was a little trail there. And I asked him finally, I said, Larry, and he had a whole ball of mosquitoes around his head that didn't seem to bother him. But anyways, I asked him, I said, will there be any bears come by here tonight? He said, yeah, probably. That's their trail right there. There's some bear poop there, some bear poop there. But he said, you're over here, they probably won't bother you. But you know how to deal with them now. And away they went. So there I was camping in bear country. And oh wow, was I ever happy to see the sunlight in the morning. But through it all, I really had to consider the danger, right, with what I was getting into. I had to be prepared to stand my ground against these bears. And I had to be prepared to defend myself. I had to leave my trekking poles out and so on. But you know what? I rested assured for at least a few minutes that if all else failed, I could punch the bear in the nose and everything would be okay. Madam Toastmaster.